Writing an equation of a hyperbola given the foci and the asymptotes. All right, in this problem you're going to be given the two foci and the two asymptotes. So we know that HK is the center of the hyperbola and that is the midpoint of the foci. We also know that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. We're going to need this in order to find either our a or our b value. We're going to have hyperbolas that either open to the right and left or up and down. So now remember, if you plot your foci and they're along this horizontal line, then it's going to follow this pattern. And we're going to want to use this formula where the x squared comes first. Okay, and so the a squared will be underneath the x squared in this formula, and the b squared will be underneath the y minus k quantity squared value. Also, this is the standard form for the asymptote. What we're really interested in is this plus or minus b over a. Okay, so I'll show you how we're going to use that. If the two focus values are along the same vertical line, then we know that this graph is going to open up and down, and we want to use this formula where the y minus k quantity squared value is first in our equation and the a squared value is underneath that value. Okay, and then we're going to use this formula for the asymptotes, and now you'll see that this is going to be plus or minus a over b. Again, that's the part we're going to be using. All right, so in this example, the foci is at 2 and -1 minus square root of 40. So square root of 40 is approximately, let's say, square root of 36 is 6. So it's a little bit bigger than 6. So let's just think if that was a 6, -1 minus 6, that would give me a negative value. So I'm just going to sketch a quick graph here and say, okay, I'm going to go out 2 and down to about -7, -8, somewhere along there. And then, so this value right here, -1 plus 6, would give me like a positive 5 something. So I'm going to go out here to 2 and go up to about right here. Okay, so these are my values, okay, for my foci. So now I can see that my graph is going to open up and open down. So something like that. So that just gives us the idea of which equation we want to use. So we want to use the equation that starts with y minus k quantity squared. All right, so here are the formulas we're going to use. And so let's first of all find the center. Now remember, the center is the midpoint of these two foci values that we were given. So we can see that the x coordinates are the same. So when we add these two values up together and divide by 2, it's going to give us 2 back. So the center is going to be at 2, comma, and then we want to add these two values up together and divide by 2. So that's going to give me a -1 plus -1 is a -2. And then a negative square root of 40 plus a positive square root of 40, those two values will end up canceling each other out. So it gives me a -2 over 2, which is actually just a -1. Okay, so this is our HK value. I've got my center. I need my a squared and my b squared values. Now remember, the a is the distance from this point to this point here. Now we don't know that vertice here, but what we can do is use the fact that our slope here in our equation is our a over b value. So here we have slope. All right, so if we take this value right here, we have plus or minus a over b would equal to plus or minus 3, because those are our values. We have 3 and -3. Okay, well, a and b are always going to be positive, so let's just rewrite this as a over b equals 3. Now what we're going to do is we're going to solve this for a. Since a is in the numerator, we're going to multiply both sides by b, and we get a equals 3b. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use this equation right here, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, now remember, C is the distance from the center to one of your vertices. So if you remember that this vertice here was 2 comma negative 1 plus the square root of 40. Okay, so the distance between these two is basically the difference between these 2 points. So I can find C by taking a negative 1 plus the square root of 40 and subtracting this y value here, subtracting a negative 1. So we know that when you subtract a negative 1, it's the same as adding a positive 1, and we have a negative 1 here. These two cancel each other out, and that's going to give me that C is the square root of 40. So now we're going to plug that into this formula here. We're going to replace A here with 3B, so we get 3B quantity squared plus B squared equals C squared, and we know C is the square root of 40, so it's going to be square root of 40 squared. So let's see, this will give me 9b squared plus b squared equals the square root of 40 squared is 40. And I add these two values together. 9 plus 1 is 10, so I have 10b squared equals 40. So b squared, I divide both sides by 10. B squared equals 4. We have our b value, so we need to find a value. So we're going to plug that back up into this equation right here. A equals 3b. Okay, so we're going to take that and we're going to say A equals 3 times b. Now, if b squared equals 4, we square root both sides and we get b equals plus or minus 2. Now remember, b is always going to be positive, so it's a distance, so b is going to be 2. So A equals 3 times 2, which is 6. Okay, so now we have everything we need for our formula. So we're going to plug this in. Y minus, and K, remember here K is a negative 1, so when I have minus a negative 1, that turns into plus 1, quantity squared, over the A value squared. A is 6, so you square that, you get 36, minus X minus H is 2, X minus 2, quantity squared, over my B squared, and B squared is 4. And that equals 1. And that's your equation.